All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I've got a few words to open up, and then I'll kind of turn it over to our panelists. So, in recent years, central banks have been creating central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, and it's now shifted from more of a theoretical vision to an impending reality. Governments around the world are advancing their development from China's digital yuan to the European Central Bank's exploration of a digital euro. And the US and many other nations are not far behind. Supporters claim that CBDCs will bring modernization and efficiency to our financial systems, streamlining transactions, improving security, and expanding access to those without traditional banking. But to the Bitcoin community, this story reads differently, a narrative with a much darker trajectory. For Bitcoiners, the creation of CBDCs signals an intensification of centralization and control, systematic erosion of the individual financial sovereignty that Bitcoin seeks to protect. CBDCs by design represent the antithesis of Bitcoin's core principles of decentralization, censorship resistance, and individual freedom. Rather than empowering users with choice and privacy, CBDCs enable a level of surveillance and control that's unprecedented in history, with the potential for governments to dictate every facet of how we transact, save, and spend. On this panel, today, we're going to dig deep into this evolving financial battleground. The question we face is not just about currency, it's about freedom. CBDCs could easily become tools for enforcing government agendas, leveraging programmable money to curb purchases, tax instantly, restrict movement, or enforce behavior through financial pressure. They could lay the groundwork for a reality where financial freedom is a memory, replaced by systems of control over our economic lives. And yet the proponents of CBDCs claim that they are inevitable, a step forward into the future that promises convenience, security, and inclusion. Can these promises really withstand scrutiny? Will CBDCs function as a bridge to integrate digital finance with traditional systems? Or are they, as some fear, simply paving a road to serfdom under the guise of modernization? Today we'll unpack these competing visions. We'll confront tough questions about monetary policy, surveillance, and control, and ask whether CBDCs can coexist with Bitcoin's vision, or if they will fuel Bitcoin's appeal, perhaps, as an independent, permissionless currency. This isn't just about technology or policy, it's about the future of financial liberty and individual sovereignty. Are CBDCs a threat to everything Bitcoin stands for, or could they inadvertently drive more people toward Bitcoin? With these questions, I'll turn it over to the panel for some opening remarks. We have Giacomo Zucco, Juan Diego Sol, and Efrat Fenigson. So why don't you make some initial comments, maybe start with what are CBDCs and kind of what are the implications of it?
I will start to pick road to serfdom over bridge to Bitcoin. I think that CBDCs are just the final.
Brazil, Lula said that we need to restart the monetary system, start from scratch, because the World Bank and the IMF are not good institutions anymore. So they're all alluding to we need to change the monetary system. What we have until now is not enough. Now, in order to change it, they need to have at least 3 silos in place. One is CBDCs. The other is digital identities. They need digital IDs. And the third one is ESG and climate or nature-related assets. And there are talks about that. So if you listen to BlackRock or many other big financial firms around the world that are basically monetizing a lot of assets, just like our Bitcoin, and we like it because it makes our Bitcoin go up, but they're also trying to monetize nature. So they're looking at water and carbon and opening them up as financial markets, and they want to start bringing them into the picture because they need more assets to monetize, because the fiat monster has to continue growing. So we need ESG, which is the underlying policy, I would say, to take that natural resources ideology and trickle it down into corporations and private sector. We need digital identity, we need CBDC, and once all that is in place, or at least starting, we can then try and do whatever Black Swan event or whatever happens to be a good excuse in order to now turn the switch on the new monetary system. And I think we're going to see it happening gradually, not like a one-time event. And we're seeing the landscape being prepared for it with the abolition of cash, with closing bank accounts or closing banks, complete banks, and merging them into bigger banks. So like a lot of work is being done in the background to enable that shift that is going to happen, I think, inevitably. And last thing I would say is Bitcoin has the advantage of time. Bitcoin is there earlier, the system is obviously more mature, millions of people are already onboarded. If people are becoming aware of Bitcoin more and more, then we can actually front run CBDCs and take that adoption power that they need so much for CBDCs into Bitcoin.
I want to zoom out a little bit. We're talking here today fundamentally about trust, right, and the nature of trust. So kind of taking a philosophical tack, I want to pose this question to the panel. Basically, is the concept of banking and custody or operating based on trust, is it inherently bad, right? Like, is there a place in society for trust-based institutions? And if so, what is it?
I think the answer is no and yes. It's not inherently bad, and there is a place for that. It's just that it doesn't scale. There is no place at scale. Trust is usually very easy in short-term dynamics and in small social dynamics like a family. It's actually, we would not even want to live in a world where we eliminate any trust relationship anyway. Trust is very efficient and is also human, and it's the constituency of the small level of society. The problem is that it cannot scale. You can trade favors with your circle of friends and family, but you cannot easily trade favor with people you don't understand and you don't trust unless you have a system of contracts, a system of guarantees, a system of enforcement, or a system of protection of your rights and your property. So in order to scale up, you have to leave trust back. The problem with fiat is that it tries to replace, it's not entirely true that fiat is based on trust. Fiat is based on violence. It's an attempt to pretend you can scale trust to a global level and to a multi-generational level by replacing trust with violence and still calling trust. So like petrodollar agreements or a national legal tender are not just about the people trusting in the fiat money, are also about people being prevented with force from selling goods and services for something which is not the US dollar. And confiscation of gold, no matter what Saylor says, was not based on trust. I mean, was based on the trust that the government was actually following up the threat of physical violence if you didn't give up your gold to the government. So I think that trust cannot scale. It's beautiful, it's great, we need it, but to a smaller circle and in the short terms. What can scale in time and in space is either markets or war, basically. And for many reasons, market is better.
Any other thoughts on that?
So for me, I totally agree. I don't have many other smart things to say on top of what Giacomo said. I do think that trust is super important when you're looking at smaller scales. I think that in the CBDC front, the central banks are selling trust as a ticket for CBDCs. You can trust us, you know us, we've been handling your money all the time until now. We're going to continue doing that for you, so rest assured you can keep being not independent, reliant on other people. Your life will be easy and convenient and we will do the work for you. But basically this is part of a bigger trend in humanity, I think, of dumbing down humanity and making humanity be less responsible for itself. Basically, when you put your trust on others, you blindly, without questioning or without deciding what is correct for me to put my trust on and what is not. And obviously we all know that fiat is definitely not a thing that we should trust, the fiat system and the central banks. But people do that just out of fear of violence, like Giacomo said. They do that because they don't want to be different. They do that because it's convenient. And that convenient trajectory is prevalent. We're seeing it everywhere. The whole digitization trend that we are part of in the last 20 years is just all about making our lives more convenient, better. So if we're trying to constantly make our lives more convenient, there is a trade-off with having the responsibility and the self-sovereignty. And so at one point you have to stop and say, do I trust this because it's convenient, or do I take the time to actually do the work and take that trust back to myself and learn something new and develop some self-sovereignty muscles?
I think, as Giacomo was saying earlier, trust in the current fiat system does not scale in the long term. I'm sure everybody in this room has at some point been burned by a bank or had a terrible experience. And trust only level up until there, right? After that, you need a system that can scale alongside and replace the fiat system.
And the other thing is FUD. Like, we'll see. We're running into a bull run now, right? We're starting to see the ECB just launched a white paper saying how Bitcoin impoverishes people that don't have Bitcoin today, because everyone that has Bitcoin is going to be richer and everyone else is going to be poorer. They're going to do whatever they can to destabilize the trust in Bitcoin. And they will play that ticket more and more, governments and central banks. And I think it's up to us, educators and people who actually care about helping people opt down of that system, to show them what is trust, and do they actually need trust in order to handle financials. And the last thing I'd say is about self-custody. I think that self-custody in Bitcoin is great, and I do a lot of work to be my own custodian. At the same time, when you already hold a lot of wealth already, trusting yourself is hard. You want to also have other entities that can help you in guarding what's yours. So I am all for self-custody. I think that there is a case for trusting also other institutions that will help you take care of your wealth.
I think that Efrat made a very good point about the food and culture and education. I was wrong, I think, before when I say that the main way the government scales up the fiat system is only violence. There are at least two. One is physical violence, or the threat of it, and the other one is just superstition and lies and indoctrination. I think it was Ayn Rand saying that the two ways for the state to proliferate is the warlord with weapons, but also the wizard with lies and delusions. And actually, the government uses both: indoctrination and superstition, and violence. So for many people, the fiat system is not just imposed by force. It would be wrong to say it is. For many people, it is just a magical system that somehow can escape the laws of reality and economics. So if in my household I have to save before I have to invest, but the government magically doesn't follow the rules, the government can just create wealth by printing. Everything that doesn't apply to humans magically applies to the government. That's actually more of a superstition. It's like a false religion, and it's actually part. So that the fight is in two battlefields. One is the physical one, where we have to basically defund the government by removing the cantillon tax that can be used to pay for enforcers, fiscal enforcers. And the second battlefield is in our mind. So basically, debunk lies and confirm truths, which is an entirely different battlefield, but it's just as important. So, absolutely a good point. I will still not call this trust, but it's closer. It's a sneaky thing. Superstition is similar to trust, but it's definitely not healthy, and it does scale a lot, but it's scaled in a harmful way.
I want to talk a little bit about the actual implementation of these CBDCs. Efrat, you touched on some of this in your talk. Many countries around the world have gone from just concepts to pilots and testing. But to my knowledge, there's no widespread successful CBDC that's been rolled out. My question is, knowing how governments typically are not very capable of implementing large-scale infrastructure and difficult technical things very well, are CBDCs even feasible? Is it just a pipe dream that they have, or can it really become real?
My idea is that governments are inefficient but effective as long as they can use an infinite amount of money and resources. So if they can command an amount of resources which is 3 orders of magnitude more what the market would require to do that, they can still do that, even if inefficiently. Of course, there are inner pushes and forces toward corruption, but they can be compensated by just throwing more money at it. I think that it's not obvious that they can make it. Technically, it's really a no-brainer. So it's just, you just need a database. So if a bank can do it, the government can do it. The tricky thing is political, because so far the government survived and conquered more and more space from the civil society, mostly by corrupting and co-opting cartels. So just like the Kingdom of England did with the Eastern India Company, they didn't control commerce directly. They created private cartels with government-granted powers in order to control stuff. So when the American Revolution started, they were against a private company, like the East India Company, that were granted power from the government. The government did the same for fiat money. They cartelized the banking and financial system. So central banks are a government-funded institution, but is formally owned by private shareholders in many countries, and the private banks, commercial banks, even if they are mostly co-opted and corrupted by the government, they still have some kind of disaligned interest toward CBDC. If a central bank is saying, I'm taking over to myself, I will do customer relationship directly, I will disintermediate the commercial banks entirely, I think there will be some pushback from the commercial bank. So technically speaking, it's not a huge challenge. It's a political challenge, but I'm not sure when you mentioned there is no one successful example in place, maybe Efrat can tell us more about that again after the presentation, but I think that China is scarily close to that, arguably. The style is still a mix of direct Communist Party intervention and some fake private company like WeChat, but there's basically a very, I think they're very close to re-implementing. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I agree with that definitely, but I also don't agree with what you said about banks, and I will refer to it. But here's the thing, almost once a week, I don't do it every day because I don't care about it that much because I have Bitcoin, but almost once a week before I go to bed, I pray that they will fail with CBDCs. However, they're not going to fail. They're going to give it whatever they can, and if they really want it to work, it will work. The reason is, we've seen it happening in 2020 and 2021 with COVID. They'll print more money, and they will put in the needed resources in order to make it work. And how? They build an incentive structure. It's very easy. They succeeded immensely during COVID to get populations of almost any country in the world to participate in a pharma experiment. It was a pharma experiment. Most people did what the government wanted them to do because there was an incentive structure in place. The incentive structure was just like in the diagram I showed of the International Monetary Fund. There is a diagram called READY. The incentive structure is monetary and non-monetary. If you come and take this pharma product that we give you, you get something, pizza, basketball, whatever. They did stupid things everywhere in the world. And you get some subsidy, and you get non-monetary incentive in the form of social acceptance, in the form of being included in society and not being like me, not being able to go to a cafe or cinema or whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted to go, and I couldn't go because I didn't take part in the experiment. So they have the incentive structure in place in order to enforce it, in order to make it happen. And in regards to the banks, they are collaborating with the banks. They're not going to try and create a war. They are aware that this is a problem, and that's why most central banks around the world are not talking about a retail model, which is directly from the central bank to the end user, because they know they're not capable of implementing that. They are talking about a two-tier model through the commercial system, through the commercial banking, or even other institutions that they call financial institutions. For example, they will give them special authority, a big supermarket, right? They will give them the authority to issue tokens to their customers, and that will be a CBDC. So they will lend out to the financial institution, the CBDC, and then the financial institution will give it to the end user. And those companies that have the ability to handle B2C, business to consumer, they will be the ones in charge of that kind of relationship. The banking systems and the financial institutions will be in charge of the relationship with the central bank, and that will solve that problem. And the other thing is, they are collaborating with the private sector. So the government itself doesn't need to know how to implement CBDC on its own. Yes, they're probably incapable, but there's a thing called private-public partnership. This is the model of operandi for the World Economic Forum and any government that is participating in this facade. And so they are encouraging all the time for the public sector to collaborate with the private sector. That's why they are running hackathons in all the different countries. And they invite the private sector, startups and companies to come and implement use cases of the CBDCs, because they want them to be part of this. And they've done it in Thailand, they're doing it now in Israel. They completed a 3-month hackathon sponsored by the Bank of International Settlements. 13 companies presented. Who was a winner? PayPal was second place, I think, but there was another company there. So it's inevitable that that will happen, in my opinion. And lastly, I would say X, Twitter, I think is going to be an interesting player in that sense, because it already has the user base. It can be the app of everything, just like WeChat or Alipay tomorrow morning. Once it introduces payments with some digital token, and governments collaborating with X, ban.
Sorry, Juan, if you allow me, just one consideration, because I think Efrat is right. So I think that we can define CBDC at least in 2 different ways. One is the current system with the government/fake private companies interaction, with the cartel of big companies working with the government and for the government, and they just lose any remaining space of freedom, so they just eliminate physical cash, they centralize surveillance, and this is totally doable also with the happy cooperation of the commercial banks. There's no conflict here, I totally agree with that. A further model of CBDC would be the one in which the central bank will manage everything in-house, so there is no role for commercial banks anymore. This is less realistic politically, but Efrat is right. For the objective of maximizing inflation and censorship, they don't need this. So I totally agree. Sorry.
So, for example, regarding the government's implementation of a CBDC, if we look at fiat currencies as a measure and as a show of what governments were able to do, which fiat currencies are now collapsing, I think that will also be the case with the CBDCs. But nowadays, since everything is much more digital, it might take even more time. But I think eventually CBDCs, if implemented, will.
All right. I've got a little thought experiment for the panel here, if you'll entertain this. Imagine you're put in charge of designing fixed CBDC for a friendly, cooperative nation. You can introduce any features you like. You can introduce any kind of privacy, security, architecture, redeemability, issuance, any other attributes of your choice. You can also magic wand and introduce any legislative rules you want to accompany your new CBDC. How would you design the perfect CBDC?
This is not even so much a thought experiment. This is a delusion that I think many in the industry entertain for real. Like many Bitcoiners thought that it's possible to play 3D chess with the government and to say, yes, let me build your CBDC, and I just want a little bit of privacy, some connection with some scarcity, and then you try to sneak Bitcoin into that as a first best. And the second best is you let it fail with the inflation, but you make it heavily compatible with Bitcoin, so it's easy and trivial to use it as an off-ramp and on-ramp to Bitcoin. So basically you sneak Bitcoin into a governmental operation, which is the opposite of Bitcoin, and nobody realizes it and they just fall for it. I mean, if sometimes history is strange, so if we can use the attempt by government to completely finalize the fiat experiment in order to destroy it by sneaking Bitcoin under the rug and under the curtain, that's funny, but it seems like very ambitious to me. So the best, if I had a magic wand, I will actually make that stealth operation succeed. There are a few companies trying to do that. Use my Bitcoin sidechain for the CBDC, and then everybody will be Bitcoin interoperable, and everybody will dump the fiat to get Bitcoin minted. That will be the best outcome, but seems very optimistic.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, this is a great idea. I would actually do one of two things. Either create a system so good with the most surreal and dark use cases built in first, like switching on and off your wallets and freezing your account. And they do it today, the hackathon for parental control. They want to show the parents that they can switch off the wallet of the children. I will put it straight away for everyone. Like you can just switch on and off wallets for whatever, family members, to your wife, your husband. So all the use cases will be there from day one, so that people will obviously use it, they will try. And such horrible things will happen that they will go, I'm not going to use that anymore. This is horrible. So that's one thing I would do. Or the other thing I would do in terms of security, I would leave a lot of loopholes and backdoors for hackers to come in and make the system obsolete very quickly.
That's a more realistic option, I think.
So I think the perfect CBDC is one with which you can only buy Bitcoin.
That's very restrictive.
One button.
All right, I want to share
One customer.
I want to shift the conversation over and touch on stablecoins. So, stablecoins is another thing that's getting a lot of attention these days. What is the relationship between CBDCs and stablecoins, if anything? What is the idea here with stablecoins, whether issued by governments or private corporations? How does stablecoins fit in with CBDCs?
In my opinion, there is one similarity, one big difference. I start with the difference. The difference is that stable coins as of now are nothing central at all. They are actually kind of a return to the free banking, because like right now Tether is like one of the biggest central banks in the world, and it's also a return to some degree to full reserve banking, because at least with a lot of caveats about commercial paper liquidity, but it's fully collateralized. So in a way, central banks are a finalization of the fiat experiment in terms of centralizing everything under the control of the government, one world government, and CBDC and stable coins, so-called, are actually the market fractioning over private agents that are doing that. Of course, and also CBDC is a march toward full inflation control, while Tether, for example, is collateralized, and many other stable coins are fully collateralized. It's a return to full reserve in a way. Of course, this is not clear cut, because, for example, a very institutionally friendly stable coin, I quote, because I think there is nothing stable about the US dollar at all, and it's not stable over the long run, and it's even less stable when it will be even less stable when it will hit hyperinflation, but let's call them stable coin. And I think that, for example, some very institutional friendly stable coin like simple USDC may be used by a government to implement maybe a CBDC. The similarity though is that they are both using blockchain magic as a password to do some kind of operation. In the case of stablecoin, the blockchain password is used to bypass some regulation and to do regulatory arbitrage. So you are a stable coin. You are basically like PayPal, but PayPal is forced to do KYC and manage secondary market to close on the festivity and stuff like that. While the stable coin can bypass some of those things in the secondary market because of the blockchain. Of course, we all know it's bullshit, but the important thing is that the bullshit is used to fool the government and not the investors. So there is no investor which is scammed in order to buy CBDC because, stablecoin, because the best thing you get back is just $1. So there's not much point to invest. So it's a scam, but not toward investors like shitcoins, like other shitcoins. It's a scam toward regulators, which I think is good. But it's similar to CBDC in the sense that also CBDC are the culmination of the fiat system, but branded as something Bitcoin similar, Bitcoin sounding. So they are trying to use the blockchain boom on top to make it sound more innovative. So both stable coins and CBDC, they need to use some kind of fake blockchain boom marketing. CBDC to escape to enforce regulation, and stable coins to escape regulation. Which, again, I always consider scamming the regulators is a novel thing for me.
Giacomo, what about Tether? You talked about USDC.
Oh, yeah, first I told about it.
You said, okay.
The only difference for me is that I don't know, I work with Tether guys a lot. I don't think that they could be easily used by the US government to implement the global dollar CBDC, while maybe Circle can. But this is, so far they are the opposite. They are just escaping the normal regulation of an unbanked, underage guy from Somalia can use USDT on the secondary market. He cannot access to PayPal. So it's the other way around. And you cannot inflate away the reserve of Tether easily. So I see them as an anti-CBDC to some regards, but they're united in the blockchain kind of.
And I agree with you that there's a good aspect in it. There's also a risky aspect in it. And you're saying you cannot inflate them. I agree, but you can continue to inflate fiat, and they're pegged to the fiat. So the more usage of stablecoins there is in the world, which is great for the people who use it, it's also continuing to feed the fiat beast in a way, and it continues to grow. I do agree with the notion that that is inevitable, because if it wasn't for Tether or Circle or others, there'd be other players that would probably be doing that. So I think we're kind of in a transitory phase where this tool called the stablecoin currently is a bridge between fiat and the digital currencies. And I do agree with you that Tether is probably a better option than anyone else, because it's a Bitcoin-based company and they do take a lot of their fiat and transit it into a Bitcoin reserve in the end, which is probably a lot more positive than any other company in that space, especially in the scale that Tether has. But I think it does pose a threat as well, because the more people get used to working with stablecoins that are pegged to fiat, they may, the funnel, the way I see it is that there's fiat, and then they're being funneled into USDT, USDC, or some kind of stablecoin, and then we are hoping that they will from there be funneled into Bitcoin. But oftentimes they just use the bridge between fiat and stablecoins, and they don't go to Bitcoin. And if governments or other companies will start luring them in to just be on the stablecoin level and not continue to Bitcoin with different incentives, etc., it may not fulfill our wish or prophecy of bringing that scale and those people into Bitcoin. So, and the other thing about stablecoins is that governments and banks, commercial banks, can create their own stablecoins, like I've shown some examples in my presentation. And by doing that, once they're ready, they can say, you know what, we've listened to you people, you have made a fuss about CBDCs because you're afraid of CBDCs and the privacy and everything, and we understand you, we don't want to scare you off, we want you to trust us, so there's no more CBDCs like in Canada, no more CBDCs, don't worry, like Trump is saying, no CBDCs, but I am working on a national stablecoin. So we need to be aware of that because a programmed stablecoin can be just the same as a CBDC. Just a different brand, a different wrapping, and making people very comfortable with, oh, okay, there's no more CBDC. Now I'm all happy, and then a red herring kind of situation would bring out the national stablecoin, the digital dollar, or whatever. So we just need to pay attention for that trajectory and keep being vigilant and smart about it.
All right, we're coming up on time, so why don't you each kind of give your closing remarks, your final word on CBDCs and what people should think about and care about. And Juan, why don't you start us off?
So I think that, as I was saying earlier, fiat currencies will fall and so will CBDCs. It's a matter of time. I do think, for example, that things like stable coins nowadays are helping some of the fiat symptoms, like high transaction fees, remittances, and financial inclusion, right? Like in Africa, stable coins like USDT are used a lot, and they're giving the ability to somebody that previously didn't have access to any type of financial system, some type of access. So I think but I think all roads lead to Rome, and all roads lead to Bitcoin.
No, I would say that the CBDCs are the opposite to Bitcoin, but they are the same thing as crypto and blockchain. Are an attempt to make the fiat system sound cooler by sounding closer to Bitcoin as technical innovation. So it's like a pseudo-technical painting, coating of the fiat system at its maximum level. So I think that there will be, it's the final boss we will fight against, but it's also the best friend of the crypto industry, which is also peak fiat.
Yeah, I'll just add that keep pushing back to this nightmare of CBDCs and controlled stablecoins. I think we all have the duty of showing people the way to Bitcoin. Start having conversations with people because just like in the EU where they started their campaign for CBDCs with all these positive acronyms to make you see how great it is, it's going to happen in almost every country in the next few years. So I think it's on us that we have all this knowledge and understanding to actually show people the difference, the key differences between Bitcoin and CBDCs.
All right, thank you very much. Let's have a applause for our panelists.